Coming up, with the official trade of Dennis Schroder to the Golden State Warriors, we get back to the business of tanking in Brooklyn. We dive in, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know that Robinhood Gold provides privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up today at robinhood.com/gold. And Doug, official as of Sunday, the Brooklyn Nets sending Dennis Schroder to the Golden State Warriors along with a 2025 second-round pick via Miami in exchange for DeAnthony Melton and also 3 second-round picks, 2026 and 2028 via Atlanta, as well as 2029 via Golden State in that deal, to go along with a player we'll touch on in one Reese Beekman as well. The tank is on, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mark's pulled this trigger as basically as quickly as humanly possible. The shirt and tie, which I like. I know you're fishing for a compliment. You want everyone that's on the podcast feed to know that for some reason you're wearing a shirt and tie today, for no other reason except to look professional, which I appreciate, by the way. When I'm wearing a backwards hat and a t-shirt, it's good to even these things out.
Contract.
I'm doing more like the Mark Cuban thing, like super rich, but also don't need to show it. Like that.
me, not so wealthy, trying to make an impression, doing the best I can.
I would never wear a shirt and tie again. I'll tell you that, unless forced at gunpoint. Okay, so anyway, we're in the full tank mode. I think that it's really interesting where we get to December 15th, the trade deadline, like things kind of open up, and basically immediately Schroeder gets traded, and we had talked about how if there was one way to really facilitate a tank, it was going to be moving him, right? We talked about this even with Golden State. We said, and we actually said that he was probably a good fit off the bench for Golden State. So like this is coming off the news that they have been discussing a possible trade. But if there was one way to sort of facilitate a move toward the basement here, this was going to be it. He was really important for what they were doing. He was arguably their best player this season. He's the guy that they have no functional replacement for at all. On the bench, like they have no real pure point guard to come in and just like take his minutes at all. And so this was a sign that one, Mark's probably understood what the value was, which we'll talk about a little bit. I'm curious to get your opinion on that, about like what came back. Two, as much as it like was important to get something back for him, I think they saw it as equally important to be like, hey, the winning games and the vibes has been pretty cool, but well, that's over now. So have fun on the West Coast.
So to at the top of it of the value of what you're getting back for him. I mean, that's we saw a little bit of this over on social. People saying, "Hey, is that enough? Did I really just see only second round picks going back and forth even before it was officially finalized?" And you had a player like Reese get thrown into the mix, who we'll discuss as well. And I kept coming back to, again, in this particular instance, we talk about Cam Johnson and what happens with him. It will be about, at least to a larger extent, the draft capital that comes back in a trade for him. For this one, it's not about the picks. It's just about removing, as you said, arguably the most important player on this roster this season. He's the guy that's played consistent minutes, 34 a game. He's the guy that's also shooting well from the field and well from beyond the arc and facilitating in a way that other players, even if capable of doing it, like say a Ben Simmons, are not capable of doing it for all the other reasons that we've discussed throughout the year. So listen, we'll get into the picks of it all and the players, but the bottom line was this was about, frankly, I'll go on a high level. I think that Sean Marks did an excellent job getting a couple of second-round picks, ultimately value here, 3-1, plus a player who's injured, mid-20s. That's fine. We'll talk about him too. But getting a couple of picks for a guy that you just needed to get off this roster to get back to the tank, I would have given away. We would have given away for nothing. We discussed about if they couldn't move him for something, he might be a buyout candidate. He might be a guy that let's just say we cannot risk having you on this roster. So I think this was an excellent job by Sean Marks getting him off this team and getting something back, in the process.
And remember too, if you go back to like sort of the how Schroder got on the team, he was essentially a buyout candidate for the Raptors, who they shipped off Dinwiddie, Schroder was not a buyout candidate. They shipped off Dinwiddie for Schroder, who the Raptors immediately then just bought out and just got rid of. And so they basically just did a swap on a guy in Dinwiddie who just didn't even want to be there anymore and had basically given up, and just really wasn't playing all that much or playing all that hard. And then they turn into Schroder, and then they get back essentially net 2 second-round picks because they give one up in the process. I mean, that's a pretty good piece of business. Like, that's a pretty good piece of business.
If you want to look at it as, turned a player like Spencer Dinwiddie into 2 second-round picks from Golden State, right? Like, if you want to look at that process going back to last year, that's something you would not say at the time. At least, in my opinion, you wouldn't be saying now about Spencer Dinwiddie and where his value lied. So I think that's another good point you bring up, that these deals sometimes, and we saw this when we talk about going back to last year and Mikal Bridges, right? Then it became, well, what was the totality of the Kevin Durant package? Well, it's all the picks you got, plus all the picks you got for Mikal Bridges. And I think that's right. Like, there's a cutoff date somewhere in here. After a couple of years, whatever happens, and players develop differently. But when you're within a 6 month to 1 year window of executing certain big, large level deals or even low level ones, you have to look at some of those moving parts and how you got to that step too. And I think that Sean Marks and the Nets did a great job when it comes to Dennis Schroder, taking him and really from when he joined the Brooklyn Nets last year all the way up until the trade yesterday, his value has skyrocketed is a heavy term. Like, it is exponentially grown from where anyone perceived it would have been when he was playing with Toronto last season.
It is, again, a good piece of business here. Like, there's a lot of different things that happened. One, they were able to flip essentially Dinwiddie into positive assets. Like, that's right. Where Dinwiddie was playing at the time, that's a great move, right? To positive assets into terms of two draft picks. Turning a 31-year-old pure point guard into any assets is a good piece of business. Like, that's not easy. We talked about how, and I want to talk a little bit more about sort of the net move of sort of like why it is important to move him off the thing. But just on its face, a 31-year-old point guard on an expiring contract into 2 second-round picks, there's not many opportunities to do that. Like, that's just not, these guys just aren't highly valued across the league. Like we talked about, we went through the whole list of teams of who did not need a guy like this, right? Like, there's just, the list was almost the whole league. And so to be able to do that, and they found the one team that really needed it. And by the way, the Warriors do really need this. And so being able to do that in this kind of like the landscape of the current NBA is a good deal. I know some people came in and say, oh, they should have gotten a first. They were never getting this. They were never getting the first round pick. And two things would have happened. One, they would have waited to the trade deadline. They would have maybe won more games, which we know is a problem. Again, in the current NBA landscape is a problem. So they might have been won more games, and they still would not have gotten a high pick. There's no team that would have come in for a first with Schroder. I'm positive of that.
And the other side of this, too, is when you talk about the Warriors and getting these picks, you have to remember, too, if not for the remainder of the $13 million contract, what was it going to look like if you bought him out and he hit the open market? So that is where you end up generating a little bit of value from Golden State. There's not a lot of teams that be interested in Dennis Schroder now. But if he was just walking around free agent style, it would look a little bit different in terms of the team. So you give up a little something to avoid any potential risk around that. Coming up here in a second, we'll go ahead and let you know how Steve Kerr feels about adding Dennis Schroder. But on the flip side of it, where does the Brooklyn Nets stand going forward here? Who's going to fill in these gaps? We'll get into the roster moving forward for the Nets and a lot more coming up here in just one moment.
All right, first, let you know about Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with the Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY in uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And let you know the show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We got the holidays coming up here. Maybe you got your favorite part of the holidays. Maybe you got those moments that make you happy, cozy at home during December. I know me and the family have that rocking. But how do you stay cozy during those winter months? For some, it's wrapping up a blanket, getting around the Christmas tree. We know how it can roll. But sometimes you want to bring those moments into the rest of your life. Therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when those seasons change. And we know that can be an issue as well. Look, the weather can kind of get to you in the worst ways possible also, right? It's like damp and drizzly outside right now. I want to keep that energy high. I want to make sure that I'm able to talk to someone, when things come up for those moments in my life, learn those coping skills, set boundaries, empowers you and me to be the best versions of yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, obviously breaking down the first domino to fall for the Brooklyn Nets, Dennis Schroder, the Golden State Warriors. The net of it is a couple of second-round picks. They send out the 2025 via Miami, which is maybe like mildly interesting, given Miami is kind of in this state of flux themselves. But they get two back from Atlanta, and they also get back one of the Warriors picks in 2029 as well. Before we talk about the Reese Beekman of it all, or we can just go ahead and knock this out right now if we want to. Beekman, by the way. So that's no, it's Beekman. Oh, good. See? But by the way, it makes my point. I had never heard of this guy. Prior to him being put into this trade package, I had not heard of Reese Beekman. Doesn't mean that he's not a nice young player working in the G League. A lot of people have compared what he's doing to what Killian Hayes is doing right now. So in terms of getting a valuable player of any kind, a developmental prospect, great. 4-year college player. We talk about all the time about what that can mean from a expectations or ceiling standpoint. The Nets have been good with this. You don't have to look farther than Jalen Wilson, late second-round pick, and what he's done for the Nets. But I always find it funny. I'm usually a guy that will get irrationally hyped around anyone who's young or anyone who has some upside. This was one of those first times where I had to go, honestly, couldn't say that I had known that he was playing basketball professionally right now. Not a knock on him, just a reality. And I think anyone saying anything else has to be a little bit intellectually dishonest in this moment.
I mean, I do this every single night for every single team. And just
you're the best barometer, right?
240 minutes, making sure that it's like we're going to get 240 minutes for every single team every single night. And we have to be able to do it because we're contractually obligated to. And even I was like, who's that? Like, he's in our database, like with with Golden State. And that is like at the far end of it. And so I don't know. I'm not like saying I'm the ultimate expert here at this stuff for sure. Like, there's people that understand this a lot more. I will say I would consider myself probably to be in the very top of the at least know the names category, because that just, you have to be able to do it when, especially with a team like Golden State that's had a lot of guys out at times, and you're making sure that those minutes like look really correct. And I was like, well, I never heard of him. And so we'll just never get on the podcast and lie about it. Look, we'll look into it, and we're gonna make sure we know. And we're gonna obviously like know everything we can. But anyway, like, we'd never come on here and be like, oh, we're so pumped. Like, look at this guy, what a steal. That would be just wrong. And I would challenge the people that do that outside of the, like the guys that are, Rafael Barlow, who's just like hardcore grinding this 24/7. Like guys like that, like, okay.
Rafael Barlow, who wakes up in the middle of the night screaming, Reese Beekman.
Oh my God. Like guys like that. Fine. Anyway, but like, again, the point here is there's two things happening here with the Nets. One, to flip the Schroder for positive value. Great. The positive value also comes in the idea that the Nets need more over the next couple of years. They need as many picks as possible. They need as many picks to be able to draft the next superstar, and also all the rotation players. They need both. They need to be able to draft both things. And so a lot of these guys are going to be out on either expiring deals, or they're going to be traded. Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, looks like their value is is maintaining here. And I think that they're probably going to be able to flip these guys into some other more positive assets as well. But just in general, where the Nets are, none of these guys, like, who's going to be on the roster in 3 years? Claxton, I don't even know. This team's going to look completely new. That's just the nature of a reset and a tank. And when that's the case, you need as many picks as possible to not only find the superstar, which is going to be required, but also to find everyone else that's going to play too on cheaper contracts. Like, this is the whole thing. Like, they just have to, there's no other way to do this. So a few second round picks for Schroeder just gives you more chances from a probability standpoint to be able to land on a guy who's going to be a rotation player, because Dennis Schroder at age 34 wasn't going to be the guy. So like, it's obvious to do this, besides the part where they just get rid of their best players so they can just increase their draft odds, which also is important. I know people hate to hear it.
No, yeah, listen, 100%. And I also think that having this many draft picks as well, especially second rounders, like, I do always go back to, not high in the first rounds, but when you're looking through these drafts and you have 4 picks in the first round and you want to get from 23 to 19, hey, you want a couple second round picks to get this done? We can do that for you, right? Like, so there is also some draft day value in just having enough assets to be able to knock on doors around the league to go get the player you want. And hopefully, Because usually, typically we always talk about, especially at the top of the draft, hey man, best player available, that that just take one of the high talents and you'll figure out the rest from there. The talent is what matters. But as you're the Nets going over these next couple of seasons, there's probably going to be opportunities where you say, well, we're targeting a specific need with this pick. We're looking at a specific player that fills the role based on the roster we're constructing. If it takes a little bit more to get there, to get that player, we've seen this in the past. Doug and I may have been wrong about thinking Omax Prosper was going to be a really good one to bring into Brooklyn in a way that he was going to develop relative to, say, Noah Clowney. But if you were in that spot and you wanted that player, having an extra couple of picks certainly helps you in that regard. The other side of it then here too is what it looks like for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the first thing is just getting Dennis Schroder out of the way. We understand that, and resetting the tank. There was something interesting. I don't know if this was mentioned by Shams Charania in the aftermath of the trade or by others, but this was by high-ranking NBA minds around the league, that Ben Simmons' role could look now to get expanded as you move forward. I was just really curious on a roster level. If we agree that the Nets are going to default back to Ben Simmons running the point after playing closer to 20 minutes than 30 in recent games, or if you're talking tank, and we said about how Ben Simmons has made the team better from a net overall, do you just jump right to the Keon Johnson experience in the short term? You're waiting for Cam Thomas to come back here. I do wonder how they'll approach the roster going forward, regardless of, we understand they're going to lose more games now.
Well, I think they're both going to start. I think Simmons is going to start at point guard, and Keon Johnson is going to start the 2 until Cam Johnson goes back. So
Cam Thomas is going to be back within. I mean, at least the projected date on his initial injury was the 19th. So even if we say, another week from now, let's say it's the new year by the time Thomas comes back, but just what is the agenda going to be here with Ben Simmons on this roster versus young guys, right? Like Keon Johnson, and giving him some run.
I think Simmons will start. I think at this point, I think it was easier to not start Simmons when it was Schroder not there. I think here, like you stop care. I think you stop caring here. I think before when it was Schroder and whatever, but now I think Simmons probably starts for the foreseeable future. Maybe they reclamate some of the. I don't think that's really going to happen. His name was tossed around teams that might want to get an expiring. But remember, I always want to remind people when they hear Simmons' name put up in those conversations, you're taking money back that the other team doesn't want to. Right? It's it's oh, they want to get Simmons
for bad money.
It's oh yeah, you want Bradley Beekman. Even he might not even be a great example. Like Levine, he was playing fine this year. Like some of these guys, the contracts he would associate with being really bad. One, just from a money matching standpoint. Two, if you're trying to get an expiring deal, it means you're trying to get non-expiring deals off your books, and those don't. Yeah. Now you attach assets to do it. So I still just don't really hold out much hope that that's going to happen. But I think Simmons, from a role perspective, I think we see him start. I think we see the minutes in the 25, 26, 27 range, something like that. And he's been, we said it before, he's been fine, right? I think overall he's been, I think it started off kind of rough. But lately, especially off the bench role, they're down to being a much better team with him on the court this season. So, and that's with him taking sort of 0.0 shots. So I think that overall it'll just be a chance to kind of just see what he can do. I just think it's just not a needle mover. I think he'll just play more, but I don't think anything huge will come from it, except that he'll just get more minutes. That's my guess.
And it is crazy though, too. I mean, because you look over the roster and you see that, Keon Johnson, he's played 23, 21, 23, 30, 32, 28 minutes. In the absence over the last 6-7 games, because prior to actually, ironically enough, the Golden State Warriors game back on November 25th, he was playing in the mostly 10-minute kind of range, had a couple of spikes, but 10 to 15 minutes a game. Then once maybe in the stretch over not having Cam Thomas, you start to see him play a little bit more, and he's been decent. He's had some bad games, had some good games. The 3-point shooting has been there in a lot of these matchups as well. So I think this is the only reason why I bring up Simmons, because I think it's fascinating that one of the things was for Jordi Fernandez, I'm asking you to do something, shoot the basketball. If you're not going to, you're going to see a minutes reduction. So it's something we'll keep an eye on. I don't want to dwell on any more than that, but just the idea of if you're not doing what Jordi wants, I don't think the fact that they're tanking now is going to change the way he coaches the team, right? This may now be a team that loses more games, but it's not going to be a team that Jordi Fernandez says, well, it looks like it's going to be a long season, fellas. We'll go ahead and take it easy here. If anything, now with these young players and some of the development, it's probably going to be more demanding on what he has for expectations on some of these guys. Last note I'll just put in here too, coming out of this trade, is that the Warriors, Steve Kerr mentioned, I'm thrilled. I told Dennis today he's kicked my butt on 3 different continents. So if you can't beat him, join him. We're referring to a lot of the playoff experiences and obviously international play as well with Team USA. And they also did note that there is a world where Dennis Schroder is going to be in the starting lineup in the backcourt with Steph Curry. So for fans that say not enough value, there is this part of it where Golden State really needed something, and they're going to try some different things to open up Steph Curry more, to open up their offense more. We highlighted how everybody outside of Steph Curry has really struggled to be a consistent shooter, especially from the outside. So from afar, it'll be fun to watch to see. I know that that's nothing that anyone cares about at this point, but I like seeing players go on to have fun, good careers, be contributors. Dennis Schroeder is going to a great position here with Golden State Warriors after playing some good basketball for Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think he's a great fit there. I think he's a great fit.
Yeah.
We have a little bit more to talk about here when it comes to what's going to happen here post Schroeder. What's that?
You take us to sorry, I lost track of the clock here. We'll continue to talk about things coming up here in just one moment.
Before we get to that, tell you about friends over on FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. NBA action as well. Right now, if new customers going to get $5, going to get 150 in bonus bets if you win. That FanDuel Sportsbook app is going to give everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, on the NBA. It's all in one place. You go to FanDuel right now. And we know they've been one of the best teams against the spread this season. Right now, hosting the Cavs at home. Cavs -10 over on FanDuel. I'm actually shocked by this because the Nets, no Cam Thomas, no Schroeder. And Cavs one of the best teams in the league. This must be the Jordy Fernandez factor, because I struggle to find how this is like not a much higher line, except that it's in Barclays. But hey, it's our friends over at FanDuel. You can take advantage right now. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 real money bet. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right. As we wrap up today's Locked On Nets episode, it turns out wearing a tie, it does not make you smarter. But the bottom line,
cutting off the circulation to your brain, pal.
Get a little thin up here. Air getting a little thin up top. I'm not really prepared for this. Bottom line being, as we know, Dennis Schroeder via the Golden State Warriors. I did think it was interesting too, because you got these Jimmy Butler rumors swirling in Miami and what's going to happen there. And I think you start to, at least now, I wonder about, as we'll preview a little bit here. Got the Cavs game tonight, obviously, but Cam Johnson's going to be the next name we talk about. Dorian Finney-Smith's going to be the next name that we talk about. I wonder how many of these things may open themselves up where we start hearing like 3-team deals, because we've talked a lot about what are good landing spots for Cam Johnson. But some teams are a little more restricted when it comes to the money. And now, so some teams may look around and say, who's looking to dump something? I think the Nets are probably, or if you agree, probably going to be in a position here. Didn't happen with Dennis Schroeder. Took back DeAnthony Melton, but it's under 12 million. That's 12.5 million. It's different, and he's injured. The Nets at some point are going to end up, I think, with some contract of some size that everyone's going to go, good Lord, 25 million on this guy. But it's going to be a part of the facilitation process and maybe what gets them the most draft capital back for a Johnson or DFS.
Yeah, I think that, look, again, there's no other way to make it work. Like, you just have to get money back. This is always the problem with getting young players and picks and another player that matches it. It's always that's always the most difficult part.
Somebody, by the way, real quick, sorry. Somebody, by the way, was like, DeAnthony Melton, the guy's injured. I was like, oh my goodness, we're completely losing the plot here, fellas. We gotta focus up.
This is tough. It's rough in these streets, man, trying to explain this to people. I'm doing the Lord's work and I'm happy to do it, but it's a labor of love. It's a labor of love explaining to people that just don't get the certain aspects of this. Like, look, here's the thing. You're never going to get it both ways. These guys are just old. I know that, like, he's been the Nets' best player. He's going to be a bench player for the Warriors. Like, that's it. They've already said it. He's going to be a backup point guard to Steph. He'll probably play 15, 16 minutes a game, maybe a little bit more. Like, that's just what he's going to be. What are teams giving up for that? They got 2 seconds out of that. Like, everyone should feel pretty good about this. Cam Johnson is going to be a little different story. Still pretty bullish on the market there. DFS, slightly bullish on the market there, but like kind of just, happy to just be surprised with that one more than anything else. But these are just, people just have to like wrap their brains around that this is the nature of the NBA. Teams, draft picks are really important. Now, second rounders can sometimes get tossed around like candy because teams aren't that interested in, like, the relative value on second rounders is pretty low. Yeah. I mean, not a lot of like really good rotational players come out of the second round. Like, that's just how it is. Like, if you look at just the top players in the NBA, most of them are not from the second round. I know there's, like, for every once in a while, there's a Jokic and a Brunson. Most other guys are not from the second round. Most other guys just kind of never land, right? And so you made a good point about sometimes packaging things to move up a little bit, packaging to just like sweeten a deal to like get something done. Just having them around does help teams in the Nets position because you can usually facilitate other trades rather than just use them to like draft a bunch of players, but they are useful to have around. So I think from that standpoint, I think we had to feel pretty good about it.
And they are sitting in a spot now. I think they're close to 30 picks total now over these next handful of draft classes.
Yeah,
so they've got a ton. They were like 14, I think, in second round picks, maybe 14 or 15 now with all these transactions, and there'll be more coming in here as well. Last notable thing for me, just because this is now, we are now entering, and just wait, there'll be more trades. We are now entering like the tank mode, right? The Nets are officially going to turn their attention to it, and it's worth just noting. Listen. Washington at 3-21. They understood the assignment better than the Brooklyn Nets did, and they drove hard. They drove hard to the tanking hoop. But when you go in behind it, for everything that's gone on with the Brooklyn Nets this season and some of the wins and the concerns and everything else, they are 10-15 right now. The difference between it's 5 wins between them and the Pelicans and the Utah Jazz. It's only 3 to Toronto, to Charlotte, to Philadelphia. Like, it's, it seems seismic, and it felt like it was seismic early on. But when you talk about those lottery odds and the first 3 picks all being equal in terms of landing top 4, 48% when you get into the 4th and 42 at the 5th position, watch these teams. Watch what they do at the deadline, because you're going to get a good barometer about where they are. And by the time this is done, over this next week, by the way, and this is really important, if the Nets make the trade sooner, like they're starting to, that means they get worse faster. And the worse that they are sooner is the more losses they get sooner. And it means they'll be right back, I think, in the mix of those top picks. Like, I don't think we're too far out from the Nets and us still being able to have that conversation about being certainly in that top 4, top 3 kind of territory.
I'm not worried about it at all. I think this team's going to really bottom out here. Like, they have no guards. Like, they have no, they just don't have a single guard in the team, really. They have no point guards. Like, so there's just start there. Like, the Schroder was so important to what they were doing. It really is kind of just like startling. And one last point for me.
His 1.6 assists over the last 5 games begs to differ, sir. How dare you?
They're -11 with him off the court this year. Net rating -1 with him on the court. Like, that's one of the highest net ratings in the team, by the way. Maybe the second highest, only the DFS with guys who play like real minutes. So he's just as important as it gets. And last point, I'm just going to get out of here on this point about just overall draft picks for people that don't want to tank, that don't like this, and that always just come in around the Sixers, and like everyone's just going to trade for infinity on how the Sixers, the process didn't work. The worst thing that ever happened in the NBA was Sam Hinkie going on and calling it the process and having it not worked, because it drew attention to this idea that is correct. Like, it drew attention to the idea that is correct, and then it just didn't work out for this team. And now every dope in the whole world just comes at with this is the example. I hate it. I'm just going to give you a quick math breakdown. It's going to take 1 minute to break this down about why you want high draft picks. Of the top 35 players in the NBA, let's say, right? So rough list, it's most of the guys you heard of. We can quibble around who these guys are, whatever.
Any number of words we could use.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to fit this in. It mostly is going to be the list of guys you did. The average draft position of the top 35 guys in the NBA is 7.27. 7.27. That's the average draft position of where the top players play. Now, I'll even account for there's like 2 main outliers with this: Jokic and Brunson. 41st pick. So I'll lop off Jokic and I'll lop off Brunson, but I'll also lop off LeBron and Wemby. All right. So I'll take the 2 high. I'll take the 2 lowest, and then I'll take the 2 highest. And now you get down to under 7. The under 7 is the average draft position. And we all just agree that on average, many more good players that stick around for a long time in the NBA come from the top of the draft. It's like so obvious. Yes, I get that the Sixers thing didn't work out. No one need mention that anymore. Like, it's plenty. We can give many examples where it does work out. We're drafting like Tatum and Jaylen Brown very high in the draft, works out pretty well for the Celtics, or drafting Luka pretty high, or drafting Wemba pretty high, or drafting LeBron, or drafting Kyrie. Like, all these guys who went on to be really good. It's just better to draft high. So I just don't want to hear it anymore. Just don't save it. Retire the Sixers thing. It's so annoying. Anyway, average draft position 7. And if we start lopping off the outliers, it only looks better for the higher parts of the draft, because you can just keep lopping off the number ones, and you're just going to keep getting higher and higher in the draft.
Further helping the Nets and this perspective of getting to those top 7 where all the talent is, Dennis Schroder and Ben Simmons played 180 minutes together. They were a plus 6.84. When Ben Simmons was on the court for 267 minutes without Dennis Schroder, minus 6.67. And they were disastrous, minus 17.38 with both those guys off the court. So all the needles are pointing directly down. And on a rare occasion, it's really, really good.
Hey, look, it sucks. It sucks to root for this. I'm with you. I don't like rooting for this, but we
didn't root for it. We just accepted it when it happened, right? That's what our agenda. We said we're fine with what happens, and once they turn the needle, we go ahead and support the cause.
We're accepting that they're working within the confines of the rules of the NBA, and it's correct. Yep. No one's rooting for it, but it's coming to peace with it. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets where you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well. See Adam in a shirt and tie today. He has promised to wear this shirt and tie every single day for the rest of the season, and we're gonna hold him to it. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen.
Oh, no matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world. That's John Keating. And you know the movie that's from, Doug.
It sounds made up. It sounds like something like
this. Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams.
Yeah, okay. He was an English teacher. Let's
Well, to be fair, stand-up comedian, English teacher, it all checks out.
Okay. Inspiring. But let's get to Mars.
I stand up on my desk.
That's the kind of thing. Self-driving trucks. That's what changes the world. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.